Hello everyone, it's Rob B here, and of course I'm with Rob D. And you are listening to the Property Podcast. We're back with episode 183, and this week, even though we've done that many episodes, we're finally looking at the buying process. We're going to map out every single step and give you our sneaky tips on what you can do to improve that process.
Yes, welcome. This is episode 183 of the Property Podcast. 183, and finally we're talking about buying a property. This is what it's all about, really. So you can plan all you like, you can have a great strategy, you can go out and you can ferret out the deal of the century, but if you can't get it through from that stage of finding it to actually having all the legals done, having it in your name and ready to go, then it's all for nothing. And there's a lot of deals that fall down at this stage. So it's really important to know what to expect and how you can boost the chances of having it complete successfully. So that's what we're going to be talking about in our topic of the week this week. We've also got a handy resource that ties nicely into that. But first, Rob, this is not the first time that we've been chatting this week.
It's not. Less than 12 hours ago, we're not into sleep that much, we were doing webinars. And we were doing webinars on Brexit, but more importantly, what the prices are doing now and going forward in the future as well. I think they were a little bit popular, Rob.
Yeah, we upset a lot of people, as is standard, because we had over 500 people registering for the open session and only 100 people could get in, which is a bit awkward. We also had a magazine subscribers only session, so we could help more people get in, and we're going to keep doing quarterly webinars for magazine subscribers. So yeah, not everyone could get in, but do not fear. If you were cursing us and couldn't get into the room, don't worry. We've recorded them and we're going to be editing it together for a course that will go on the Property Hub at some point soon once our editor has worked his magic. So if you were there, thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. But if not, don't worry. We'll announce it when it goes up.
Got lots of emails. Got some angry ones as well. Angry about the free content we were giving away. But we will pay to have it edited and give it out free as well. Many people were very nice with their emails, just showing their frustration. But one or two, a little bit more passive aggressive, we could say. Thank you for those as well. Keeps me entertained. If that is not enough, Rob, for keeping us busy, because we are a tad busy, as we say, we've decided to have a discovery day. And no, that's not anything about meditation or anything like that, internal discovery. Actually, a little bit of discovery about what we do. Now, clearly, some people know what our businesses do because lots of you work with us. But it is shocking, as in how bad a job we must be doing at communicating what we do. The amount of people who come to us during the meetups, even the summits, and say, yeah, so your podcast is really good. Did you get up to much else? I think we normally make it pretty clear that we're flat out and doing a lot, but it seems we're not very good at doing and explaining that. So we've decided to have a discovery day so you can find out more.
Yeah, and related to that, I keep, every meetup I go to, someone seems to say to me, so do you own property yourself? And it's like, kind of weird to talk about it every week, but not. But anyway, on the subject of upsetting people, every so often we get told that we ramble too much at the start of podcasts, exactly like we're doing now. And we deliberately try not to and keep it brief and not talk about what we're up to outside of the podcast so we can get to the good bit. But as Rob says, we're clearly doing that too effectively. So if you do want to come out and find out more about what we get up to outside the podcast and also speak to experts from other sectors, get questions answered, talk to other smart people, then come and join us. 26th of November is the date. It's a Saturday. We've got a morning session and an afternoon session so we can fit more people in. Both of them are going to be the same. And it's nearly free. It's only a £5 and all of that goes to charity. The only reason we're charging anything at all is because more people are likely to turn up. When it's free, people just book a million tickets and then decide later not to show up. So it's a £5. It all goes to charity. You can come and hang out with us. We'll both be there. We'll be there for the whole day. We'll be doing a Q&A. You can talk to us. You can talk to other people on our team. You can speak to some of the guest experts that we're going to have coming in. You should get your £5 worth, even if you just have a cup of tea and a couple of biscuits, but hopefully you'll get plenty of knowledge as well, that will make it well worth your time. So if you do want to do that, then there's a link that we'll put in the show notes, but that link is pretty simple. It's thepropertyhub.net/discovery.
Tickets are obviously limited because we can only fit so many people in a room. So if you can't get a ticket, please, those angry ones, don't email me. Hopefully we'll see the vast majority of lovely people on the 26th of November. We'll see you there. But Rob, before we get into the main topic, we have a news story, and I really, really, really like this one.
I wonder why you like this one. Could it be because it's bearing out what we've said for a little while?
Oh, well, I hadn't even noticed that, Rob, but I'm glad you picked up on it.
Yeah, so the story is, it's in This Is Money, and it says, Glasgow, Liverpool, Manchester and Nottingham see biggest house price rises as property in the south takes a breather. And between us, we own property in 3 of those 4 cities. So there you go. We've been saying for a while that it's this enormous gap that has opened up between the southeast and the rest is going to come together. We've been saying this for a long time. We're not necessarily saying that there's going to be an enormous crash in the southeast, but we're saying that that gap is going to start closing up because of prices plateauing and dipping slightly in the expensive areas, and other areas that are relatively undervalued. We were talking about affordability a couple of weeks ago. Areas that are relatively undervalued picking up faster than prices elsewhere, and that appears to be exactly what's happening.
So as we said, we'll link to it in the show notes, along with all the other bits we've talked about and will talk about this episode. So go to thepropertyhub.net/buying process. But let's get into it. This week's topic, buying a property step-by-step guide. What's going to happen and what you need to do. I think, Rob, it's really interesting. It said right at the top of the show that 183 episodes in, and we're actually talking about the buying process. And that's, I don't know if you can hear this, but that's slap hands. That's naughty, because although we've not talked about it much, nobody really talks about it that much, but actually it's one of the most important parts of your property journey, because this is where so many deals fall down. It's not the negotiation stage, which, can be difficult, but we've talked about that numerous times. And it's not so much the letting stage, because again, we've talked about that. We'll talk about it more in the future. But this part is so tricky, and there's so many plates spinning during this process that if one falls down, the whole deal can come falling down. So to know what's going to happen and be prepared for that, I think we've been a bit naughty.
We have. It's because it's all for nothing. If you go all the knowledge that you amass and all the properties you go and view, if you can't actually get the deal done, then it's all for nothing. And as you'll know when you've been through this a few times, you never actually know that the deal is going to be done until you finally exchange. And that could be weeks or months after you've actually had an offer accepted in the first place. Now, you'll always have deals falling down because there's a lot going on, and sometimes stuff just won't work out. But there are lots of things that you can do and you should do to increase your chances of having it successfully go through. And that is what we're going to talk about today.
First stop, if you like, is preparation. Before you've even got your deal agreed, there's certain things you need to be doing. The first one is pick who you're going to be working with. So if you're buying with a mortgage, pick a mortgage broker. We highly recommend you do that. You can do it yourself, but as you'll see from the process, you'll probably certainly want to use a broker, especially if you haven't done it before. And you have to pick a solicitor as well to complete the conveyancing progress, the legal work, if you like. Get them ready. Don't get your deal signed off and then go, right, better get some people in place. Because 2 things will happen. 1, you're immediately causing delays. But 2, because you're rushing, you might not pick the best people. And that's what you do want to do, is pick the best people. So if you've worked with people before, if you worked with a good broker before, great, or a good solicitor before, great. But if you haven't, you need to get a recommendation. And if you can't get a recommendation, then you need to do a lot of research. But recommendations are easier than you think. Get along to a meetup, one of the Property Hub meetups. Just ask every single person you meet, can you recommend a good solicitor? If you do that, you're going to find someone. Equally, can you recommend a good mortgage broker? Rob and I can as well. So if you want to reach out to us or just speak to someone in your next networking meeting, you're going to get a lot of recommendations that way. And it's better normally than doing your own research alone. However, make sure you do research them on top of the recommendation.
So once you've picked your mortgage broker and your solicitor, see if there's any paperwork that you can do in advance. Anything that you do now will speed things up later. So on the broker side, they'll want you to do something that they normally call a fact find. And because I've been working with my broker a long time, I'd forgotten what this was. And then when Rob reminded me just before we started recording, I sort of broke out into a cold sweat, because this is normally a very long document asking you for loads and loads and loads of information about you, which is really important, because that's going to help them find appropriate products. It's just not the most fun. So you're far better off doing it when you're not under time pressure, rather than when everything's kicking off and you're in a rush. Also with the broker, an optional step, you can get them to get a decision in principle from a lender on your behalf before you go out and actually start offering on properties. So you don't have to. If you're confident that everything's going to be okay, then you don't necessarily need to, but you can get a decision in principle or a DIP to give you confidence that you're going to be able to get lending and everything's going to be okay. And sometimes agents will want to see proof of funds, and so that helps as well. But do as much paperwork as you can, get prepared, because you will be thanking yourself later.
Okay, so you're going to agree your deal. Congratulations. You've done hopefully some good work there, and you've got yourself a great deal in a great area. Then you're going to officially appoint your solicitor and your broker. As we said, they've come highly recommended, or you've worked with them before. And then you're going to return that paperwork that they're going to send you, and make sure you get it back to them very quickly. If it's your solicitor, they'll send out a pack that you'll need to return, so you appoint them officially. The broker's going to need that fact-find document back, which you can fill in the last missing blanks once you've finalised the deal. Don't sit on those. Don't even give it a week. Get them back straight away, because the people, your professional partners, your broker, your solicitor, can't do anything for you until you officially appoint them or give them the tools to get going. So get that back straight away. The tip there is do not delay. Be almost like you're a greyhound on the track, in the box, ready to go, and you're itching to get out there. As soon as they say, deal agreed, go. Do not delay on that paperwork. That is where I see so many deals held up, because people hold back, wait a week and a half. Oh yeah, I'll get that back to you. They've been all excited about getting a deal agreed, and then suddenly switch off. This is the time actually to switch on.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. People think that getting the offer accepted is the end. That's actually the start. That's when you really need to start doing the work. And that's an important step. Also, if you haven't worked with any of these professionals before, they'll have ID requirements as well. And that can slow things down. If you're not local to them, you might have to go and get documents certified by someone local to you. You're going to have to go and dig out a bank statement or proof of address of some kind. It takes time, and it's very easy to let that drag on for a couple of weeks, but that is time lost. They can't do anything for you until you've done this. So get to work. Now, at this point, the process diverges. So we've talked about the solicitor and the broker. They're both going to be working for you in parallel, and they can move along at slightly different speeds, but these are like two tracks working alongside each other. So we're going to talk about each of those in turn. If you're not using a mortgage, of course, you can completely ignore that part of it. But if you are, then these are two things going on at the same time. So let's start with what you need to do with the solicitor, Rob.
Okay, so the first thing that's likely to happen after you've returned the forms is they're going to need some money on account. And that's to start the work for you. Now, that can be anywhere from a few £100 to a few grand, depending on your solicitor and what you're buying. If you're buying a new build, they may also ask for your reservation deposit at that point. So that comes off the price of the property, but your solicitor's going to normally request that early on and then notify the seller that they have that. The best thing to do here, the best piece of advice we can give, is ask your solicitor in advance, what are they likely to want from you in terms of upfront funds, so you can prepare for that, so you can be ready and get it over to them straight away. And also the time frames. When are you going to ask for this? So you are ready, you're prepared, and actually you're showing, especially if it's a new relationship, your solicitor, that you're on the ball from day one. The next bit, Rob, is particularly fun.
Yeah. This is where it could get ranty, but let's try and rein it ourselves in. At this point, the legal process begins. Your solicitor and the solicitor for the vendor will be talking to each other, or should be talking to each other, shall we say. This is something we moan about a lot, but solicitors tend in conveyancing not to be the most proactive people. And if left to their own devices, it's very easy for documents to just sit there and get ignored, because they've always got a lot going on. They've got a heavy caseload, and it's always the more urgent things that get attention. So if not pushed, it's very easy for things to drag on for far longer than they should. And depending on the temperament of the people involved, it's also easy for solicitors to get bogged down in kind of trying to pick little fights with each other about stuff that doesn't really matter. Now, this should be a non-contentious area of law. Like, you're both trying to achieve the same thing. The seller wants to sell and you want to buy. But sometimes they can get into little wrangles and sort of start raising all kinds of objections about stuff that you don't really care about that much. So the tip here is to not just assume that things are happening, because chances are they're not. So you need to be patient, because this can go on for weeks. It can sometimes go on for months. So don't make unreasonable demands. Don't be difficult, but you do have a responsibility here in guiding the process, making sure that things are happening and make sure that things are panning out in the way that you want. You can't expect it to all be done within a week. It's just not going to happen. But that you could save yourself easily a few weeks by just kind of nudging things along a little bit. But it's also worth being aware of that some types of deals will naturally take longer than others.
Yeah, so typically repossession deals take longer. That's what I've seen in my experience. They nearly always take longer. And that's because sometimes the bank is still involved and they want to have a say in the process, which, as you know from banks, they're not normally the most efficient and take a while. But often, actually, the reason why is a lack of information. The seller isn't a willing seller for obvious reasons. So the property that's been put forward often will lack information. So, I mean, this is a general thing to be aware of for any deal, but particularly for a repossession deal, is that you can have the best solicitor in the world, but if the other side lack information or aren't very good, then it's going to hold up the process regardless, however good your solicitor is. So just be aware of that. And yes, while repossession deals should give you a better discount and a better deal, you have to pay for it in the time and the patience. So I think the overall tip at this point is make sure you keep in regular touch with your solicitor. Daily, they will hate you. Weekly is probably acceptable, or every 2 weeks. Speak to them every week or every 2 weeks for an update. So let them know you're there. But also, don't give them a hard time when they can't move things forward because of the seller solicitor. These things sometimes take time. So the next one, it's not anything you really do here, it's just to be aware of. Your solicitor will carry out searches, things like an environmental search, or sometimes, depending on the area, a coal search. These things you probably will question, probably will think are a waste of time and money, and maybe, in some cases, you're right. However, it's something that you have to do. Especially if you're borrowing money, most lenders will want to see the searches completed. You can't cut corners here. It doesn't cost thousands, it costs hundreds. It's not great, but it's something you just have to live with. Bite the bullet. It'll take a couple of weeks to do, but it's not one you can cut corners on. Just accept it. Be aware of it. It's going to happen, but it's just part of the process. And there shouldn't really be any hold-ups unless anything is flagged up, which, if your solicitor is good, if something's flagged up, they'll be able to say this is expected. If you've got a rubbish solicitor, they'll tell you something's flagged up and let you form an opinion. But, for example, in the north, there are often lots of things flagged up because of what old mining towns and so on. Most of them are more than well taken care of, and there's nothing to worry about. Make sure your solicitor is guiding you and you're not having to guide your solicitor when it comes to the results.
Now, the amount of work that your solicitor's going to have to do at this point will depend on several factors. So whatever you're buying, there'll need to be searches raised and certain work that will need to be done in terms of preparing the contract. But other elements will depend on the property. So if it's a leasehold property, for example, they'll need to request information from the management company. That can add to the delay. If that takes a while, it also adds to the cost because you're going to have to pay them for their time in pulling all that together. That'll be reflected in the fee that your solicitor charges you, and there'll also be an additional fee from the management company to produce all the information they want. So that's more documents, more work, more time. If you're buying a tenanted property, there's also going to be more work involved and more documents that they need to get. If you're buying a tenanted property, you should really make sure that your solicitor gets hold of the AST for the tenant. Make sure that they get hold of the deposit protection certificate so you know that a deposit has been taken. And they should really be getting rent statements as well and inventories and all that kind of stuff. So you actually know that the tenant is there, everything's been done properly, they're up to date, all these things. So you can take over the tenancy and just keep it running and know that everything's been done as it should. Now, we've already said there are some situations where that's not going to be possible. If you've got a situation like a repossession or an auction purchase, you're not necessarily going to be able to find these things out, and it can all be sorted out later. But ideally, if it is possible, you want to make sure your solicitor gets all this. Some are not familiar with buying tenanted properties. It's not something that they've been through lots of times, so they can forget, and you have to remind them that you need them. But if you can, it makes life easier. So again, it's about you taking responsibility, being informed, guiding the process. And having done all that, finally, Rob, I think we're at the end.
We are. Well, this part of the process anyway with your solicitor, because they will send out your contracts and a report on a title. You need to read them. Yes, read them and sign them and return them as soon as possible. Don't get sloppy now. Get it back. Ask any questions you have. The solicitor should guide you. Remember, they've done all the work, so they're happy with the contract. Make sure you're happy. But chances are, if you picked a good solicitor, there shouldn't be any issues there. And then get it back ASAP. The solicitor will then ask for your final major deposit. At this point, make sure, again, you're prepped, you're ready. Speak to your bank in advance. Let them know you're going to be transferring a large amount of money and ask them what the process is, what you need to do. Do you need to go into the bank or can it be done over the phone? Depends on your bank, I imagine. Often I have to go into NatWest to get the deposits transferred over. Bit of a hassle, but I know it, so I prep it and I book it out in my diary. So that's it. But you're not done yet, because obviously running in parallel to this, if you're buying with a mortgage, is the process with the broker.
Yes, indeed. So let's go through this broker process then. A little bit more straightforward, this one, or at least a little bit shorter. There are fewer steps, but still really important that they are all executed successfully. The first one is really, really important. Work with them to help them pick the best product for you and then get a decision in principle from that lender. Now, the right product, we've talked about this before, it might not necessarily be the one that's at the top of the best buy tables. There are lots of factors involved, as well as just the interest rate you have to pay, various fees and all that kind of thing, but also making sure that the product fits what it is that you're trying to achieve. So, for example, if the pressure is on and you need to buy really quickly, some lenders will be off the table because they're either slow in general or they're particularly busy at the moment and it's going to take a long time to go through. A good broker will know that. Also, making sure that you get a product that fits the property. So, for example, if you're buying a very cheap property, some lenders will be off the table because they won't lend. They'll have a minimum threshold. So you need to know that. And also the length of the product that you go for. So there's no point going for a 5-year fix, even if it's a really, really great deal at the moment, if your plan is to add value to it and refinance in a couple of years' time. So a lot of this your broker will know or should know from the fact find that you so painfully did earlier. But work with them at this stage. Make sure you pick the right product, taking into account all of those factors, so that you're getting the best deal you can financially, but also making sure it's appropriate for what you're trying to achieve.
So you've picked your product, you've got a decision in principle, sometimes called a DIP, and now your mortgage broker with the vendor will book the valuation. So they'll need to get access. That can take a little bit of time, be aware. So make sure the vendor knows that you want to book a valuation and that's all been covered off already. Get that booked in. Again, another word of warning, if it's tenanted, it can slow down again because you have to give the tenant notice and get in at a time that's acceptable to them as well. So you do all these things, you get your valuation booked, and then it's plain sailing. No, it's not always plain sailing. Gonna not go on a 10-minute rant here because we've ranted about valuations before, but we have had experience and me seeing thousands of transactions go through, experience of valuations being all over the place. Higher than expected, lower than expected. The same properties getting valued tens of thousands of pounds apart by the same professionals. Yes, it can be frustrating. Often, it'll be fine, but just when you don't expect any problems, and it's the ones I don't expect any problems on, occasionally it happens, you just get a bonkers valuation. Cross your fingers. There's not much you can do at this point. Just hope that you get a normal, sane valuer who uses common sense and you should be fine. But the amount of people who, it's not just personal experiences, the amount of people who come up to us and tell us that the troubles they have with valuers is unbelievable. But I think enough said, there's not much you can do. It'll be booked. They'll go in. They'll give you a valuation, and at this point, you're ready for your offer. It normally takes, depending on your provider, your mortgage provider, anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks for an official offer to come out. And then, once your offer's in, let your solicitor know. They might not know, so you do need to prep them, let them know it's there, because that means you are pretty much ready once you've gone through these two processes with your solicitor and your broker to exchange.
Finally, yes, this is where these two processes come back together. So you've got the contract drawn up, you're happy with that. You've got the offer of the funds, so you know that you can draw them down when you want to. You always get a period of time that's stated in the offer between getting the offer and when you must draw down the funds, so that offer expires. It's normally a couple of months or so. So you've got some time to work out those final wrinkles, but then these processes come together and finally you're ready to actually exchange contracts. And it's worth remembering that this is the point at which the property is actually properly yours. Well, it's not. You still have to complete. But at exchange, the vendor is legally bound to sell to you, and you can impose big penalties if they don't. So when it comes to exchange, at this point, a completion date will be agreed. So you'll be committed to the purchase. You'll agree a date that is going to be a firm completion date. It can be the same day if there's no reason to wait. If everything's in place, you don't have to wait for people to move out or any of that kind of thing. Exchange and completion can be on the same day, or it can be as many as a few weeks apart. So when you exchange, that deposit that you sent over to your solicitor earlier will be transferred to the vendor. And ahead of completion, your solicitor will then need to request the funds from the lender for the balance in time for completion. They will do that. You don't need to do anything at that point because you've given them your mortgage offer and they can take care of that. So at the point of exchange, you're not actually ready to get the keys quite yet unless completion is on the same day, but you have made it. Finally, the legal work is done and it's officially yours.
Congratulations, you got through that simple process. As you can see, it's not always straightforward, it's not always simple. And that's why you need to be putting in just as much effort at this point as you've done for getting the deal in the first place. So be prepared, make sure you're doing the things when you're asked to do them, don't delay on it, don't sit on paperwork, don't hold things up, and hopefully, as long as everything falls into place, you should come across the line successfully. You know, every single year with RMP, I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of properties go through this process. And some just fly through and some take months. You just never know. And so, it's often the ones that you think will be simple take longer. You know, sometimes I've expected it to take weeks and it's taken months, and then vice versa. So patience sometimes, and quite often, needs to be put in place. But that's why I'm always reviewing the things we do, the processes. In fact, we're making improvements all the time. We've got some new things we're introducing in the next few months. But the main thing is be prepared, be ready, be efficient, and be the one leading the process. Don't expect your solicitor and your broker to lead you. Yes, they should be good at what they do, but have that weekly chat with both of them to make sure things are ticking along as they should. That's what we do. We speak to the brokers and the solicitors every single week. We've got a really good resource coming up, and it very much relates to this. We'll talk about that in a minute, and I think you'll find it very useful. But before that, and before we tell you what's coming up next week, we just have to acknowledge the wonderful nature. We talked about people who moan earlier, but this is far from it. These are just absolutely wonderful human beings, Rob, who leave us nice 5-star reviews.
Oh, let's hear one then.
Okay, so Charlie Edinburgh says, I've been wanting to enter the world of property development and lettings for a long time. Having one rental property at the moment, it spurred me on to expand my property portfolio, full of great content and advice. Thank you, Rob and Rob. Well, thank you, Charlie. Lovely review. Really do appreciate it. And if you'd like to leave a review, we would gladly like to receive it. Go onto iTunes, pop your info in there, say a few words, hopefully positive, the vast majority. In fact, every single review of 350 odd have been nice, bar one. So thank you very much to the vast majority of our audience.
Yes, indeed. And our way of saying thank you is to make sure that every week we give you something valuable. Hopefully you got value out of the main topic, but just to really make sure, just to put that cherry on the cake, we've got a resource of the week for you as well. And this week, Rob, you are very generously sharing something that ties in exactly to what we've just been talking about.
Yeah, so it's an internal working document at RMP. So A word of warning, it's not going to be the prettiest document you've seen, but it's functional and it works. And it's a flowchart of both processes that we've just talked about. You can access it via the show notes, which this week are the propertyhub.net/buying process. You just need to make a copy. When you go in there, it'll be a Google Doc. Just press, you can't edit it. So if you want to edit it, just say make a copy and then store it in your own files. But I thought I'll give you access to that. So you've got one of our internal documents we like to share. You can use that, educate yourself, and take advantage of it. So go to the show notes, follow the link, and you can use it. It really brings this process to life. It's one of these subjects that sometimes it is great with visual aids. So maybe if you look at that document at the same time as listening to this podcast, a lot more will sink in. And talking about things sinking in, hopefully when people come along to our Discovery Day, it'll actually sink in what we do. We're not going to bang on about this loads. I think one word of warning that we didn't really mention before, the tone of the day is going to be like the podcasts and the summits and the magazines and everything else we do. We're not going to get everyone in the room, lock the doors, and then beat you all until you buy things. There's not going to be anything to buy on the day. We are going to give away things and chance to get involved in different ways, but there'll be no money transactions. And as Rob said, that $5 is just to make sure that people come along, actually turn up, and we'll cover the costs of all the room and give all the money to charity of the tickets. So you're supporting charity, networking, meeting Rob and I, meeting our teams. I think it's going to be a good day. Oh, and other experts as well. So plenty of reasons to turn up if you haven't worked with us already or don't fully understand what we do. 2 sessions, a morning and an afternoon session, 3 hours each, and only a $5. Absolute bargain. But as we say, once they're gone, they're gone.
Yep, and just to reiterate, there will be no courses on sale for you to sign up to where we will teach you all the secrets that we don't share on the podcast. You will not be asked to call your bank and raise your credit limit on the spot or any of that stuff. It's just information. So go along to thepropertyhub.net/discovery to grab your tickets for that one. We'd love to see you. We'd also like to see you back here next week, where we're going to be talking about a topic that follows on from what we've just been talking about. So you've gone through this whole arduous process. You finally got the deal done. Well, at this point, you want to let the property out, unless you're going to be flipping it. But let's assume you're going to be letting it out. So what do you need to do to prepare your property to let? We've talked about some of the principles in the past and how to have more success doing this, but we're going to talk about the procedure. Again, we're going to go into the details just like we have today. We're going to talk about what you need to do each step and give you a little tip with each step to maximize your chances of success. So please do join us for that.
Please do. Okay, so we'll be back next Tuesday with Ask Rob and Rob, and then, of course, back with the Property Podcast next Thursday. So until then, everybody, take care, have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.